First of all, let's just let me just thank you for doing this with us. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, sir. I mean, like this is a huge fanboy moment because I was in the seventh standard, and when Shaitan came out, and I still remember it was around 9th or 10th June 2011 it came out, and
11th June.
11th June, yeah. And I saw it on the 13th of June. I remember the date in a movie theater. And when that Khoya Khoya Chand sequence came up, like I'm sure you must be getting it a lot. Like everyone says this to you, that Khoya Khoya Chand sequence. I hadn't seen anything like it. I mean, when I saw that for the first time, that there's a shootout going on, this Khoya Khoya Chand being played, and it looked so different from all the films that came out that time. And I this was the first time I wondered who's the guy who's making this. And then like with David and everything, and recently I just finished watching Tesh, both the series and the film a few days back, and I haven't shut up about that film ever since. Like it's such an amazing film. So first of all, like this is a huge honor for me to be talking to you right now, sir. So let's just get right into it. So you have been part of like you started out with making short films, and your first few short films are very acclaimed, and uh, you got you got Mohanlal sir to act in your first short film. You got Setu sir as the DOP. And you've said it in interviews that you were not very like you were not well versed with your filmmaking techniques and everything. What made you take that leap that okay, enough of thinking about making a film, let me just go ahead and make a short film or do something with films right now? What was that period like when you were making that transition?
So I was not well versed.
Can
I
you hear
was
me, sir?
not versed. I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said I was not well versed. I was not versed at all. Like I had no clue, no links to the film industry. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know how to go about it. I had enrolled myself for a film course in New York, the New York Film Academy, and I had visa issues. I landed in America and I got deported back, so I couldn't do the course. So once I got back, I this was kind of almost in a vengeance thing. I said that okay, if I can't do the film course, I'm gonna just go ahead and make 10 short films, and by the 10th one, hopefully, I'll be experienced enough to make a feature. So that was my idea. So I wrote 10 short film scripts. I made a budget for those 10 short films. I had a day job. I had a day job for my father. So I actually allocated every month how much money I can keep aside to try and save money to make 10 short films. So after about a year and a half, I, I said, okay, I have enough to make the first one now. And I picked the easiest one out of the 10 short films in terms of setup and logistics and everything. I said, this might be an easy one to do. It just looks like a 2 to 3 day shoot. And then I went about getting a team together, and that's how Setu came on board. Akiv, the editor, came on board. I actually almost cast for my film even by technicians because I had zero experience. So I wanted to make sure that all the people who came on board had more experience than me. And Lal sir was like on my wish list. It was not like I called up Lal sir and it just happened. It took a long time to get Lal sir to meet Lal sir. But once I met Lal sir, he was on board like in the first 10 minutes of the narration. So he was quite a sport. The thing is, he spoiled me because I thought all actors are like that. I was in for a rude shock later, but Lal sir was really sweet with me. And considering it was my first short film, first venture that I did, and I think that short film happened because of all those experienced people coming and helping me. So be it the actors, Lal sir, the rest of the cast, Alam, Juhi, the technicians, all of them, uh, because of their experience, they were way more experienced than me. They helped me make that film. They helped me realize that vision that I had for the story. And for me, that was a stepping stone. So from there, then when I realized that before I move on to a feature, I need to do a couple of more these short films. I need to get my hands dirty more to kind of to start with a feature. So luckily, I took that time. The first short film got me a job with Mani sir. I got to AD on Guru with Mani sir. And then after Guru, I made my next short film. Then I made a couple more short films. So basically, before Shaitan, I made about 4 to 5 short films, and that's how I realized. I got my experience, like hands-on experience, by making films. not by actually learning ideally I would have liked to go to college, go to understand the basic fundamentals of filmmaking, but since I didn't have that luxury, I didn't choose to go that route. I ended up learning on the job. That's how I started.
So, kind of digressing a little bit here. When you were being deported, okay, now this is something that Abhijit Deshpande sir told us in a class. That when you were being deported, you saw a screenplay that you thought of, or I don't know, I can't remember if you did or you thought of, for the lack of a better word, smuggle. Uh, what was that screenplay? I want the audience to know that what had you discovered then?
Abhijit said I smuggled a screenplay.
Yeah, I think he said something like that. Some anecdote he shared with us.
No. I can be honest about it now. No. Years later, I went back to America to work I work with Hyde Park Entertainment, Ashok Amritraj.
Yeah, Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah, Inglourious Basterds. So there I had the job of reading scripts. Every day I had to read. They used to get like one stack of scripts every day. And every day our job, like my job was, along with 3-4 others, we had to read the scripts. We had to make a note on each script. And there was a format. We had to write it as per the format. We had to make a note on our take on the script, the pros and cons, the log line, all that. So we had to do all that. So as I was doing that on a daily basis, and of course we're not allowed to take the scripts home. We're not allowed to take the scripts out. We had to sit there, read, and make. And one day I got the script of Inglourious Basterds, which was still it was still roaming around studios. Basically, I think it was still looking for part funding. So the script was roaming around different studios. And when I saw the script and written by Quentin Tarantino, it was like a big moment for me. The fact that I'm getting access to read Quentin Tarantino's script even before it's going to get made. So it was quite a exclusive thing for me. And I just wanted to share that joy with my fellow filmmaker buff friends. So am I going to get into trouble for this? I might. I don't care. It's okay. I stuffed the script in my pants.
Yeah.
I stuffed the script in my pants, and I took an early lunch break. I ran to. I didn't go to the nearest copy machine store. I ran to another district ka copy machine store. I made 3-4 Xerox copies, and then I came back and put the script back because I wanted to. The special thing about that script was it had a cover page which was handwritten by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that's what made it even more special. So I made copies and I got it back to India, and I think I gave one to Abhijit also.
Yeah, he told us.
So basically, I've lost the chance of ever working with Hyde Park again. Hyde Park को पता चलेगा मेरे को कभी chance नहीं देगा.
अरे सर उतना हम लोग किधर Hyde Park follow करते हैं. So now coming back to this, when you said that you were not versed at all. So how did you get Sethu sir and your crew together to say yes to this film by a first time filmmaker who doesn't know anything about making a film?
I think it's the same for every filmmaker starting off here. If you are clear about what you want to say to the story, if you're locked on the story and you know very clearly that this is the story I want to say, that conviction that you have on the story, that has to kind of permeate, and you that has to cut through to all the people who you want. So if the people you're trying to get on board, if they don't connect to the story the way you are connecting to it, then they will not do it. As simple as that. Then even if they do it, then they might be doing it for other reasons. But the prime thing there is the most important thing that they need to connect to the story the way you are connecting to it. So I knew my story. I was very clear that this is a story I want to do, and I was able to convey that story to all these people, be it Sethu, be it Akeev, be it my art person, everybody. I was able to tell them this is the way I'm looking at it. It was a simple idea, but I guess I was able to narrate that well enough for them to get convinced on it. The fact that I was able to narrate and convince Lal sir itself was a big deal for me. So, like I said, that clarity I had on the story. So I think that clarity helped me get all these people on board. Sethu, actually, initially it was Mukul who was going to shoot it, and last minute Mukul couldn't do it, and Mukul suggested Sethu to me. And Sethu had just come out of Tishu sir's film, Charas, a joint effort, I remember. And I met him. So I met him after that, and I kind of convinced him. So in fact, I remember he still calls me Harami. Whenever he sees me, he calls me Harami. That was the pet name he had for me. So, and it was such a joy to work with him because he never made me feel that I'm doing it for the first time. And to be very honest, he was like for me, he was the director of the film because he had to design the shot. I could only say that mujhe ye chahiye. I had no idea about lensing. I had no idea about kahan pe kya. So he was able to take me through, and he decided how to do. So he really handheld me and took me through the whole process. And I'm forever indebted to him for that. Like for letting me realize my story and my vision through his work, and he was so generous about it. So that way I've been very fortunate to have worked with such good human beings, good people, who are definitely great technicians, but at the same time they're good people. So I was fortunate that way. Same with Akiv, who was also such an experienced editor. By then also he had edited a lot of films by then, and he stepped in and he helped out in such a nice way. In fact, he edited my second short film also. So they were all great support system for me. So yeah, it is very important when you're starting off to surround yourself with the right people, people who can, who are experienced at the same time, who can guide you correctly.
And also, like you have this knack of getting people on board. Like later on, you took away Silkar sir, and you got him to edit your first film. Now that's like every first film of yours, whether it's a short film or a feature film, you've surrounded yourself with people who are very, who are the masters of the game. Now, tell me a little bit about, like, you were clear about your story. You were seeing your story, and uh, but that aesthetic, but that, what you would go on to be associated with a certain sense of visual language, a certain sense of rhythmic nature to scenes and everything. When do you think that started coming in you? When did you start inculcating that?
I think uh, that comes from a lot of influences that I've had over the years watching films. So since a kid, I've been a huge film buff. So I used to watch a lot of films. So because I don't have any formal training in filmmaking, my learning is by just watching films. My learning is only by whatever films that I've seen and watched and liked and revisited so many times. Those are the films that, filmmakers that I used to adore. Like I remember when I was in school, it was such a big deal when a Mani Ratnam film released. It was an event for us. It was such a big deal at that time when a Priyadarshan film released. We used to like look forward to some filmmakers. We used to like wait for their film. We used to wait for the first look. We used to wait for the posters. We used to see what fonts they used. We used to get into like every nitty gritty detail. And these filmmakers, we used to like devour them and just watch the same film again and again and again so many times. Like I remember when Tezab came out, Tezab, N. Chandra's film, right? Everybody was going gaga about Ek Do Teen, but I was going gaga about the fact that it had such a fucked up narrative. It had such a non-linear, crazy narrative. It just went back forth, and in a fraction of a second, it just kept going back and forth, and suddenly, in the end, there was a climatic action sequence between the Chaiwala and Anupam Kher. So it was like mind-boggling that they were writing and executing stuff like this. So then that made me so excited about N. Chandra. So I used to wait for when Narsimha came out, N. Chandra's Narsimha came out. I was like waiting, what is he going to do with that? Again, another filmmaker, Mukul Anand. So I was devouring these filmmakers, and so these filmmakers I used to study them. I used to literally study them only because I used to just rewatch their films again and again and again and again. And Ivy Shashi in Malayalam, Bharatan, Padmarajan, though it's like an all-time favorite. So Bharti Raja in Tamil, there was Bharti Raja. There was of course Mani sir, of course K. Balchandra. So Bhagyaraj. So these are filmmakers that we used to just wait. We used to wait. At least when I say we, I'm talking about my family. My near my neighbors were all Tamilians. So we used to all sit and watch movies together. And we used to, at that time, no TV, no channels, right? So if we had one VHS, we would just ragado the VHS, just watch it like 50,000 times. So I guess those are the films that shaped my choices later on in terms of the aesthetic. Or I guess I'm kind of borrowing from that, not deliberately, but because that's the visual language I saw and liked. So I was just trying to not necessarily replicate, but find my voice through that language, find my voice through the kind of stories I liked, through the kind of imagery that I liked. So yet, try and have my own voice attached to it. So, And that's been the process even now. That's been the struggle even now with every story. I try and say I'm trying to tell new stories and trying to say it in my own way. Yeah, so that's what.
Yeah. So, like, but after reflections and after like Rahu and all, like this is the short films that you were making, and you were discovering your process. Where did Shaitan come from? Where did the germ of Shaitan come from? Because Shaitan was a story like we'd seen films like Shaitan earlier as well, but that distinct way of looking at these characters and the way they were placed in that milieu and the Bombay and everything. Where did that come from? What was the
So
whole?
Shaitan came from Hyde Park. So because I was working in Hyde Park and they were supposed to produce a film with me, I was directing. So it was supposed to be a crossover film. So again, even in Hyde Park, the brief given to me was that try and come up with an idea based on a true incident. So Shaitan was the shortest idea among the lot. I had written some 7-8 documents, 7-8 ideas, on different true incidents. One was on the Bhopal gas tragedy. One was on Rajiv Gandhi's murder. So it was different things that I had kind of pitched, and they were like long. I had written like some 2 to 3 pages on like as a pitch. Shaitan was the one para idea that I had pitched. It was based on the Adnan Patrawala case. So the one paragraph idea, that's the idea the whole team responded positively to. They said that, this is too political, that is to this thing. They had issues there, and this one idea, they said, would you be able to flesh this out further? So then I took that one paragraph idea of the Adnan Patrawala case, and then I started writing, and I wrote, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like a 30-pager treatment note I wrote for Shaitan. It was called Spiral. It's there in my email still somewhere. It's called Spiral, and which had Kalki's character, like an American character, who's an American diplomat's daughter who's come to Bombay for the first time, and then she gets involved in a fake kidnapping thing. So that's how it was pitched. It was pitched as a crossover film, and I was gonna try and make it like that only, but somewhere down the line, I think it didn't work out with Hyde Park, and then I spoke to Ashok and I said, since this is not moving from your end, I would like to take it and make it in Hindi. I would like to rewrite it in Hindi and make it. And he said, yeah, of course, go ahead. I'll he gave me the release form on that, and I went about. Then I went and collaborated with Megha Ramaswamy, who was the screenplay writer. So she and me then spent about a good 1.5 years writing Shaitan in Hindi all over from scratch. So we just took that 30-40 page treatment that I had, and then we rewrote the whole thing in Hindi. That's when Megha introduced me to Avijit, and Avijit came on board, and that's how Shaitan came about.
Yeah. When did you find like the kind of style, the kind of form that you were going for, that you ultimately went on for Shaitan? Where was figuring that process out like?
So it's not like I had a thinking, I want to have this kind of a style for this film. I think a lot of it was being designed and written as we were writing it. And when we were writing it, there was unfortunately, I had a lot of time because I was constantly pitching it to funders, financiers, producers, studios. So throughout the process of pitching and writing, I had a lot of time to prep for each of those bits. So because I'd kind of pitched the film so many times to so many different people, it was crystal in my head. So the ideas that I was pitching for each sequence, be it Tavde's introduction, Rajiv's introduction piece, or be it even Khoya Khoya Chand for that instance, or the church sequences. Those are the things that while I was pitching, I had a design in place for it. So then every time I'm pitching, I'm only saying the same thing again and again and again. So it became more and more crystal in my head. So it became easier for me to then communicate it to the team when finally the team came on board. Madhi is not the first DOP who came. There were so many other DOPs who were there before Madhi with whom. So I spent a lot of time with different DOPs and then the film couldn't take off for a long time. Finally, Madhi came on board, and then with Madhi, I spent a lot of time designing and talking about sequences. In fact, Madhi recently, I think just 2 weeks back, sent me a Instagram clip of an equipment which is being promoted right now. Of it's like a um, it's a crane
That
which moves like
circular.
a grinder. Yeah, so that is
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
these people are seeing now. But Madhi designed it back then. In 2009, Madhi had designed that rig. Because we had written it in this thing, so I wanted that shot to be designed like that. So he actually sat and worked with a what do you call a metal guy, and he actually constructed that thing. He constructed that crane, and it was called. He called it the Grixie. So it was a grinder and a mixie kind of moment. So he called it a
Grinder
Grixie,
and
and
mixie.
so he designed it back then. So that's what you need. You want a collaborator who will take your idea and fly with it. So that's what happened with the cinematography. The style kind of we evolved with Madhi, with Shrikar sir, with Prashant. They were the key collaborators who helped me find the style for Shaitan, who helped me fine tune what I had in mind, who helped me take it further. Ranjit Perot, Mikey, Prashant, Javed Ijaz. These are all the people who kind of came on board to just whatever was there on paper, they helped me lift it. And I think Shaitan was a great experience for me to learn so much, because of course it's your first film, so you're going all out and killing yourself to do it. But then it was such a great experience to learn and pick from all these people. I realized it's so much more of a collaborative thing, and I absolutely enjoy doing that.
Yeah. But like as you said, you because you had narrated it so many times, the idea started coming in your head. But let's go a little bit further than that. Like you said that you don't do short breakdowns, and you went on location. And for example, that Muhammad Ali Road sequence where you guys kind of did that bat shot, and like the cameras goes up and down. So like on location when you go and when you see that okay, there are n number of ways of doing a scene, and so what's your process then? What are you looking for then when you go on set
It's
and
not
when
like I
you're
always
about to shoot
improvise
a
on
scene?
set. I definitely keep it fluid. Some key sequences you kind of prep and design in place. You have that detailed conversation with art and DOP and everything, so that it's not a major surprise on set. But sometimes, or rather most times, I try and keep it fluid, because mentally I block in my head when I see a location. I'll block. This is the way I would want to do it. But then you want to give that flexibility to the actors. You want to give the flexibility to your DOP, because he might want to choose, he might want to light it differently. So you want to give that leeway to them, and then decide whether you want to go that way or you want to go the original way that you had in mind. So my process is that I try and keep that little bit of space open for my actors to come in and uh, you know do what they want to do with the scene. Maybe because they might want to move around, they might want to do something else with it, they might want to sit in a different spot. And same thing for my DOP, because he or she might want to light it differently, might want to start the scene differently. So I keep a little bit of leeway, and then I try and choose which is the best way to go about it. So it's always like a half and half, back and forth. But yeah, I don't truly believe in doing like a storyboard, uh, short breakdown, detail. I do it for certain action sequences because they need it to save time and all that. But otherwise, I'm not much of that. I don't. I mean, it's a great thing. It works for a lot of people. Doesn't really work much for me.
So, like you got Marisa to do your camera work, and someone had asked you that like he hasn't ever shot in Bombay before, and you were like, that's probably the reason why you want to go ahead with him, because he'll shoot it differently. Were you ever coming from that notion, because you have grown up in Bombay? Were you ever coming from that notion that okay, I need, like, this is a very mundane location, how can we make it look like? Was that ever a concern, or were you just focused on the narrative?
There was an AD who worked with me, an associate called Deepa Venkatesh, who worked with me. And she had worked with me on Rahu as well. Rahu, in fact, she did the art for Rahu, and then she was the associate on Shaitan. She spent close to, I would say, at least 3-4 months alone scouting locations for me for Shaitan. Because my brief to her was that let's not shoot in the typical Bombay locations. Let's go hunt for places which has not been shown in Bombay. I mean, in Celluloid before. Let's show different aspects of Bombay. So let's go. And so she found a lot of these interesting locations that you see in Shaitan were done by her. The scouting was done by her. like that whole bad ball sequence. That is a men's hostel called Mitkar, if I'm not mistaken, in Mohammad Ali Road, which then later on became a shoot location, by the way. So that location was scouted by her. A lot of these interesting locations, those houses, some of the houses that you see, the Rajiv Khandelwal's house that you see, that was again something, again not a shoot location, was scouted. So my brief was that let's go hunt for places which are not your typical Bombay locations. So, and I wanted to shoot live. I didn't want to shoot on a floor. I didn't want to shoot in Mud Island Bungalow. Though finally, I did end up shooting in one of the sequences. I ended up shooting in Mud Island Bungalow, but I was trying my best to try and find new spaces. So that was, and I even till date I try and do that. Even now, if I have to shoot in Bombay, I still go and try and find places which are not your typical shoot locations.
Taking from my previous question, what I wanted to ask you is that when you focus on a narrative, it's not abstract cinema, it's narrative cinema, and it's got characters and everything. That balance of treatment, form, and the content, and sometimes it tends to go a little overboard. But you struck that balance with your very first film, and how do you think like you were able to do that? Like, what was the process behind that? There is a stylistic approach that a film has, but it's also got a very a close narrative. So what was that like making that balance? How do you strike that balance?
Like I told you, it's not like you say you write something and then say, okay, now this is the kind of style you want to go with. I don't think like that. I think everything kind of comes from the story only. So the story demands a certain way of telling. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel that the moment I get excited with an idea, with a story, I'm already starting to think of how I'm going to do it. I like with Tesh also, it was just that one scene in Tesh which propelled me to. I said that now I want to make this film. Now I want to, because that scene I could see. That scene I was, it was so crystal in my head that I wanted to see that scene being made. So that scene propelled me to push to make that film. So it's like that. So it's the story that always, finally it all boils down to the story. The story should excite you enough to approach and tell it in a different way, and the style kind of obviously evolves when others start collaborating with you, because you have a certain idea that you want to do it in a certain way, but then you kind of let the others also contribute towards it, because you know that what they are bringing to the table you might have not even thought of, and that might help lift the material. So it is a tight trope that you walk, because when you're trying to tell a story a certain way, and I've been kind of accused of that. I mean, in fact, a lot of my critique is that it takes over the substance, and my fight is that I want to make sure that my substance also counts. So I've been trying my level best to make sure that my script is rounded enough to give that emotional punch, and it cannot be just all style.
Like a friend of mine and me, while we discuss your films, so we were just talking about like how the shots in your film became longer and longer and longer with each film. And with Tash, you opened with a long take, so there was like, see and so that kind of brings me to I will come to David and we'll talk about Wazir, but coming to Tash, music in Shaitan and music in Tash both have been like, what's your, like, is it something that the influences that you were talking about, like Mani Sir, because that nature of music is in the scenes as well, it's in the rhythm of the scenes as well, and how it's being played out. And if not just Khoya Khoya Chaan, my latest favorite musical piece from your film is Sawal Mod Mohara, when he's breaking out of that jail. That is next level. I mean, you don't imagine that for a jailbreak sequence. So how do you pick these musical pieces? Like, because Saul More Mohara was already an original song. How did you discover this music, and how do you find place for this music in your films?
I think Shaitan opened a lot of doors for me, because once I started doing that in Shaitan, once I started started scouting music for Shaitan, now what happens is, now whoever I work with, they keep introducing me to different music. So it's not just my process of finding music. Now people around me keep finding music and keep sending it to me. So Sawan Mod Mohara is a clear example of that, because my DOP Harshveer introduced me to Achint's music. And I heard the whole album while on a recce for Tesh. When we were on recce for Tesh is when I heard the song. And when we were about to start shooting the jail sequence, I remember very clearly. I remember, I think we were shooting the wedding sequence. We were shooting the wedding sequence. Is when on the drive to the location, I kept playing Sawan Modapara on a loop. I kept playing it again and again and again and again. And I bounced my ADs were sitting with me, and I bounced the ideas with them, saying that, what do you think of the song? And they all liked the song, and they didn't know for which part. But I was constantly thinking for the jailbreak sequence. And there is this one section in the song which is what made me want to revisit it again and again and again. And so by the time I reached the shoot of the jailbreak sequence, it was latched on. I knew that now I'm gonna shoot for this. Now I'm gonna make sure that we'll be able to cut for this. So then once you have that lock in your head, even though I had no idea whether I'll get the song or not from Achint, though I had already started reaching out to him, but at least I shot with that in mind. I shot keeping that in mind, because then what happens is when you have that, like you said, the rhythm in your head, you have the sound in your head, the shots automatically you're editing them while you're taking the shots. You're editing them while you're taking it. So that's what happened with particularly that particular song. That's what happened with Sawan Modapara. And I enjoy that. In fact, it works better for me when I'm writing music in the script. If I know my music even before I shoot, it really helps me a lot.
What was that part of the song that kind of got you hooked to that song?
There's a synth portion. In the film when you see when they're picking up the body, the camera pans just keeps trucking onto the wall, where on the wall it's written Main Te Tu. That synth portion is what hooked me onto the song when I heard it, because I could see that visual of the walls.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because the rhythm that you're talking about, like maybe I'm reading too much into it, and I'm not sure that the shot where that out from outside the house that you took, and Harshvardhan is walking inside, his steps are on beat.
That's all Priyank. That's all Priyank. That's all the editor. Priyank is very anal about all that. So Priyank is he loves it. He loves to cut on rhythm and beat and other. So he'll finesse it, because that's actually a long take. There's a long shot of him walking. But if you watch the way the steps move, it's all Priyank. Priyank, the editor, has managed to fine tune it to the walk and everything.
Yeah. So and with Tesh, we kind of after a long time, we've seen a film where we want to look like those characters. Like, okay, it's about rage, it's about all those things, but we want to look like these characters, and the way they're shot, it's like you're following the narrative, but you're also with these characters, and you kind of, the camera work and the way it's constructed, it's complementing these characters. And that's what happened. And even with the action sequences, the way they were designed, what was your approach to action this time in Tesh? Because it's much more raw, it's much more it's like I noticed that with punches and with fire shots, there was a slight jerk with the camera that you did, and it felt like I started catching it on after the third or fourth time. I was like, something weird is happening here. Like the punches I can feel the punches. Then I saw that, okay, it did something with the camera. So please talk a little bit about the action of Tesh.
The one thing I can talk about the action of Tesh is that I just didn't have enough money to shoot for much longer. Ideally, I would have liked to shoot for much longer to cover the action better, because the kind of design we had in place for the action, I would have liked to do more. But because of my budgetary constraints, I could only shoot that much. So once we shot it, again, it was Priyank and me. The camera jerks and moves, a lot of it has happened on edit. That was an idea when we tried it on the first action sequence, and when it worked is when we started fine-tuning it more. We started working on the edit more. The jerks and that, to make it more impactful, to make it more interactive, is why we approach the action like that.
How did you go from like, I'm going in a reverse chronology now. How did you go from Solo to Tesh? Like, what was the idea? Like, how did Tesh come about? Just like you told us about how Shaitan came about. What was the idea behind Tesh?
Tesh was actually literally two different film ideas which came together. I was working on two different ideas. One was about this gangster family that I was working on, about these two brothers. And then one was this idea of these two friends at a wedding, and one secret getting revealed about a friend and how it affects the other friend. So it was two different ideas, and it just kind of merged. One day, it just kind of came together. Both of the ideas just came together, and then I got damn excited with the idea, and I realized it's an uphill task because ensemble films are quite a challenge to cast. So I don't want to say, but initially I was trying to do it in the south. This film I was trying to do it in the south. I had two South actors committed to it, and I was planning to do it in the south. But then one of them dropped out, and the other one dropped out. Then again went into limbo. Then I said, okay, let me try it in Hindi. Then I started scouting for actors in Hindi, and I can tell you, I went to a lot of people. And I'm just so glad that finally I got the cast that I got, because now I can't imagine the film without them. Be it Pulkit, Jim, and Harsh, and Kriti, and Sanjida. I'm just so glad that all these people came together, and I'm happy that this is the cast that I finally got, because they fully justified what I was looking for each of the parts. So it was like two different ideas which kind of merged together, and it dealt with one topic which I really wanted to, because I don't think there are many films being made about that subject. So I wanted to talk about that subject. But to be very honest, even with the kind of reception I've got in the film, that the subject that I wanted to talk about has not been talked about so much.
The savior complex.
See that again?
The savior complex?
Not the savior complex. The fact that it dealt with child molestation. So that is something, though it's there, it's a pivotal part in the film. But I realized that because the film dealt with rage as such a big topic, and it was called Teshan, it dealt with rage in such a broad way, big way, and everybody was connected to that till the end, that a subject like that, a sensitive subject like that, almost got sidelined. People forgot about what had happened to Jim. And me and Jim spoke about it because this was so important, that this is what triggered everything. This incident that scarred this little boy is what triggered everything. So, but that incident, by the end of the film, people have forgotten. They're more into what is happening with it. And I think that was a learning for me. That on the script level, maybe there is something more that I should have done, so to underline it, so that people remember that this is what had triggered it. So yeah.
Even we got the sense, like, while watching it, there was this feeling that if the way the whole film was put together, it felt like this was the only odd thing out. Like, it didn't feel like the repercussion of a child molestation kind of a thing. It felt much more like, like a very other testosteronic something. But it was, I mean, it seriously did. We were enjoying it, like we watched it on ZEE5, but we felt like we were watching it on movie theater. Like, it's such a long time. We loved it.
Thank you so much.
And Harshvardhan Rani's character, I want to talk to you about that. What was your brief to him? Because the intensity is much more internalized, where everyone, the entirety of the cast is so so out there. So how do you create that balance with one character that literally is, saying it very with a husky voice, and it's got that intensity? What's your brief to him?
I think upfront I told him that this will read like an antagonist. This is an antagonist part, but I don't want you to approach it like an antagonist. That's the first thing I told him. I told him that he is not the antagonist. When you read it, it will sound like that. When you play it, it might look like that, but he's not. He's doing it for all the reasons that he thinks is right. He's justified in his head. He's doing it for his family. He's doing it for love. He's doing it. So every step of the way, he has a very solid reason for why he's doing what he's doing. And I think that answer kind of made it easy for him to play a certain way. So as much as he's done so many wrongs in the film, but still in the end, when he dies, you root for him. You don't want him to die. So that was the idea. By the end of it, in fact, the end of it, you don't know who to root for. because all of them are equally justified. Be it Jim, be it Pulkit, be it Harsh, they're all great. It's not like each one is better than the other. So you don't know who you want to root for, and that was the intention. So that was the intention. That was a challenge while in the writing. Also, that was a challenge while executing it also. And I'm glad that we took that time to prep for the film, and where we could really get into the skin of it before we actually went on to shoot. So Harish was able to grasp onto a tonality which really helped Pali's character. Same for Jim, same for Pulkit. In fact, Jim came with almost 100 questions for every scene, and answering his questions made my process so much more easier for me, because it gave me clarity. It gave me, in fact, Jim's questions helped me write 3 new scenes, which I wouldn't have done otherwise. So each one that way really helped and contributed towards the film. So
Which was that one scene that made you make Tash? Like you were talking about that one scene that kind of got you there.
Jim pulling the gun on in the end in the room, when he's pulled the gun on Abhimanyu's character, and it's a role reversal. The victim has become the monster, and the monster has become the victim now. So for me, but yet Jim is, even though he pulls the gun, he's not able to kill. He's not as bad as that guy. He's not able to pull the trigger. He sees the guy in such a vulnerable position. He's not able to pull the trigger. For me, that's Tesh. For me, that's the reason I made Tesh. That was a scene that made me want to make the film.
So, like, there was another, like, I've one more question about Tash, then we'll come back to David. Talking about Tash in that sense, that the Mahi and that track, Mahi and Jim's brother's character, Krish and Mahi's track was much more, like, of course, it was much more explored in the series. But here we didn't know that, here we didn't know that she had actually, hooked up with her ex in the film. It was just like, okay, these are just a cousin who was an ex, and that's why he's freaking out. That's why I thought, because I saw the film first. What was the reason behind, like, it's a tough choice to make. Like, there's this character that will ultimately go on to propel Sunny even further. So what was that process like, editing the series and the film separately?
It was a tough call. To be very honest, the film, I was already getting so much pushback to cut down the length of the film. So there were a lot of tough decisions to make. One of the biggest decisions I had to make was cutting out Pulkit's track in the second half of Pulkit going into jail, which I had to sacrifice in the film version. And similarly, Mahi and Krish's track also got edited out a lot in the film version. But it was purely because the length, that I had to make sure that the film was slightly more taut, slightly more crisper. So we had to decide which are the bits that we'll have to let go of, which still does not affect the flow of the film. And Mahi's digression with her cousin still gets mentioned in the dinner conversation. But yeah, the fact that she cheated on him and all that got spelled out more in the series version.
Yeah. So, like, I'm not going to ask you which one do you prefer, because of course the longer story not everyone attracts. But like, which structure do you prefer? Like, of course, when you made it into a series, you had to go non-linear because, like, to keep that narrative flowing like that. Which structure
I prefer the linear narrative. Ideally, I prefer the linear narrative only, because it was written like that. The thing is, if it was written in a non-linear fashion, I would have done something else also in the writing part of it. But because you're editing it, you're trying to make it fit, then you're trying to smoothen things out like that. But I prefer the linear story only because it was written like that.
Yeah. Coming to David, now see, it's a very strange thing. Like every film of yours, I have this.
Which one did you prefer, series or film?
I preferred the film. But yeah, I mean, of course, I like the whole story, but the film kind of felt a little bit more like I felt the rage much more in the film,
right?
For some reason, yeah.
Which one did you watch first? Film, right?
I watched the film first.
So it's a strange thing. It's like A.R. Rahman's album. When A.R. Rahman's album used to come out, way back, it's always released in Tamil first, and then uska dubbed version nikalta tha Hindi mein. So depending on which one you heard first, पसंद वही आता था. Like even today for me Roja is Tamil. I like the Tamil version. I don't like the Hindi version. मुझे Tamil ही समझ में आता, Tamil ही अच्छा लगता है. I don't want to listen to the Hindi version also. So it's very weird. What you hear first, and if it's good, if the material is good, Rahman's albums, all of them are good. But I'm saying whatever you hear first, whatever you see first, you latch onto that.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. But even I prefer Mental Manadil to the Okay Janu title track. So yeah. Now coming back to David.
Let me give you one more trivia.
Yeah,
Give you one more
yeah.
trivia about Rahman sir.
Yeah.
Rahman sir used to fuck with your head. You know how he used to fuck with your head? I'll tell you. You know, because I was a avid Rahman buff, right? So I'm still am. You know what he used to do? He used to because see, when you're in school and college, you can only buy one CD ना. एक ही पिक्चर का दो CD नहीं खरीद सकते. So what Rahman sir used to do was Tamil में he used to release the album and उसका हिंदी निकलता था ना. Tracks are the same, but one antara mein he'll add some new musical instrument. Something new will be there in one of the antaras. One duet mein suddenly one new singer also used to land up, jo original mein nahi tha. So then you're like, oh fuck, that sounds so much better. But now just for that one song, one antara, I had to buy the bloody CD. So Rahman sir used to always do that. And you can go back and check his albums. The Tamil album, the Hindi album, there'll always be a slight difference. He'll change it around. He'll twist it around something or the other here and there. And it'll be such a cool twist that you would want to collect that also. This is a pure Rahman sir, fan.
Yeah, that's great.
Telling you all this. I remember there is a rhythm. He changed the rhythm. The sound, the texture of the rhythm was different in the Tamil version. It was different in the Hindi version. He's done stuff like that also.
Roja, you're talking about?
No, not Roja. I'm talking about so many other albums. There's so many other albums that he's done.
And even his original score. I mean, Dil Se Ka score, that you can't find that anywhere. It's not in the album.
There are guys on YouTube who have ripped them and put it all together.
Yeah, but it's got the dialogues and everything.
No. There are guys who have cleaned it up and put it. In fact, I have a full collection of his scores now, which is all nicely cleaned and kept. So
please share it with me. Share it with me. Okay. Coming to David. So, what do you think is the reason why David is not as celebrated as maybe a Shaitan was, or now Tash is, or even like what do you think it ended up being what it was? Because I found it a fairly decent film, and it's got like every film of yours has a particular song favorite of mine. So Rabbi is the song from David that I really love. Rana de bhao mujhe jawab chahiye, and he's like he throws the gulal and he's like, oh, that's an amazing sequence, man. That's amazing. So talk a little bit about David. What's your, when do you look back now when you look back at it, what's your reaction to David?
I saw an interview of Raj Kapoor where Raj Kapoor talks about the failure of Mera Naam Joker. He talks about and he had such an interesting anecdote. He said that जब आपके बच्चे होते हैं, जब शादी करके बच्चे होते हैं और कोई एक बच्चा आपका ठीक नहीं होता, there's something wrong with the child and he's not being accepted everywhere. That child is not being accepted. That child will be the most dearest to you. So it is the same with me. So he said, मेरा नाम जोकर is that for me. ये मेरा, इस बच्चे में बहुत लोगों को बहुत सारी तकलीफ थी इस बच्चे से, लेकिन मेरे लिए ये बच्चा सबसे प्यारा है. So for me, David is my most favorite, only because and why it did not get, because I think purely from a fact that it just did not connect. It did not connect to the audience the way I wanted it to connect. So I cannot, as much as it is close to me and I love David, the fact of the matter is that it just did not connect, did not communicate the way I would have liked it to. So I think plain and simple is that. But the strangely, and this is a learning I remember from David also. I remember, in fact, David especially, because once David released and it did not work, I was constantly trying to find out what about it did not work with people. That was something I was constantly trying to understand. And even with Tesh, when people, it doesn't work for people, I'm trying to understand which aspect of it did not work for you. Like that's the reason I'm asking which worked for you, film or series, because I don't think as filmmakers we will grow if we don't introspect and find out what is it that is managed to cut through and connect. What is it that managed to not cut through? It's a learning I think every filmmaker should take from every film that he put out. there should be a learning. If we live in a bubble ki nahi, maine jo bana bahut acha hai, then you will never grow. So, but at the time of David, I didn't know because David just flatlined, because it just didn't take off only because there were a lot of variables at stake at that point. One of the biggest being Vishwarupam was the biggest film at that time because of the controversy going on. So everybody went for Vishwarupam, and David just within a week, 10 days, it was gone. So so जिनको बोलो को chance भी नहीं मिला देखने को. In fact, weirdly now, and for years it never came on channels or any other OTT or anything. And now it has found a release on Netflix and Amazon, and it's being promoted now. But so hopefully it will find an audience in the years to come. And but it is a film which still is very, very, very close to me, because it was very ambitious for me to from Shaitan. Shaitan is a 3 crore 80 lakh film. That's what I made Shaitan in. David was like a 15 crore film. So for me, it was a big jump. It was a big film that I got to make, and it was very ambitious for me to make that scale of a film at that time. And I was very, very gung-ho when I made it. So like in my head, I knew that this is Shaitan's click, this will work. I was very confident. And so it was a reality check for me कि नहीं boss, नहीं. इतना भी gung-ho के मतलब नहीं. So yeah.
So like what
but weirdly, David got me the job with Vinod Chopra sir. Vinod Chopra sir had not seen Shaitan. He saw David. He liked David, and he called me to meet him.
Yeah. But even in David, like where were you coming from creatively? What were you trying to, like, there's this constant thing that, okay, what is the filmmaker trying to say through this film? And
David was all about forgiveness. David was all about doing the right thing. As much as it was about David and Goliath kind of thing, like the David going against the Goliath being his own demon. So it was at the end of the day, it was about forgiveness. In fact, I remember Mani sir, when he read the story, he said that why are they're losers. These characters are losers. They're not heroes. I said, and I remember telling him, yes, they are. At the end of the day, they are, but it is also them overcoming that part of it and accepting that that they are flawed. So on the script level, I was not able to convince him on that. But when I showed it to him, he said, I don't agree with you, but at least in the film, it is more convincing than on the script it was. So for me, it was about that. It was about flawed people who come to terms with what they have done wrong and come to terms with, and are able to forgive and move on. So it was about David. For me, in one word, is about forgiveness.
Yeah. Coming to Wazir, now Wazir was not something that germinated from you. It was like, you kind of envisioned it and you kind of brought it to life. What drew you to that story?
Vinod sir. It was all Vinod sir. Yeah. Not many people know, but Vinod sir and me were working on a reboot of Parinda, and I was working on the script of Parinda, like a reboot of Parinda, and I kept working on it for months. Me and Akash Khurana, we both worked. Me, Akash, Adhir, I think. 3 of us were working on that. And we had a good cracking script. We did. I like to believe it was a cracking script. Vinod sir was fully convinced on the first half. He was not convinced on the second half. And we kept rewriting second half. We kept rewriting the second half, but just couldn't. He just was not able to connect to it. So after about 6 months of rewriting that again and again, then finally I said, "Nahi, yaar, abhi nahi ho raha hai. Chhod dete." So I went to meet him to tell him that, "Nahi, that's it, sir. I'm not able to, because I like it the way it is, and if I constantly try and change it to a different way, I'll lose objectivity on what I want. So let's call it quits." And that's when he said, "Okay, no worries." And he said, "Wait," and he went in, and I'm not kidding. He has a vault. Literally, he has a metal vault. He opens the vault and he has scripts inside this vault. And he takes out like some 6-7 scripts and he puts it on the table. He's like, see these scripts and read all this and see if you like any one of these. And I saw, and there were like some 6 scripts there, and out of which, I had already, there was one of them was 64 squares, which was Wazir. and I had read 64 Squares. So I knew that this is the one I like already, even though he had kept like 6 of them. But I said, okay, sir, I'll read all of them. I read all of them. Each one was very different. One was a supernatural story, one was a love story. They were very interesting stories, a lot of them. But I knew my heart was set on 64 Squares because I had already read it once and I had liked it a lot. So I went back and said, if you let me do this, I would be more than happy. This one I would like to take a shot at. And he said, let's do that then. Let's make this. And it was as simple as I said, let's make this. So I was like, you're gonna just let me after all these months you were like making me write and you're not convinced, but this one, he said, yeah, because this is my script. I know I know what I want to do with it. So you'll direct this. So I said, okay, great. But I said, okay, I'll direct it, but then I would want to write it. He said, yeah, of course, let's write it. Let's write it together. He was such a, to have someone you have looked up to, growing up, you looked up at him as a filmmaker. To have him show that kind of faith in you and say that, come, let's write together. And let him saying let's write together is not just lip service. For 1.5 years, every day, not even letting go of Sundays, every fucking day he sat with me. Every day he would sit with me on the script and we would write. Every day we would sit and write. I remember Abhijit and Vinod sir used to, along with the other writers, used to come and go. It's Natasha, Shubhra, Ghazal. But we took a shot at adapting the 64 Squares script into Hindi. And that's how Wazir came about. And it was a great learning experience for me. I had a lot of fights with him. I fought with him a lot and everything, but I had a great time working with him. It was such a big learning for me, and till date I keep telling his stories of I have so many incidents that were like big learning from him, and I still look back at that time with a lot of fondness.
Now coming to Solo, like this, I'm about to wrap up my thing so that I can open up for questions a little bit. So my question about Solo is that like there's this question that my production designer friend of mine really like she wants me to ask you. What was like, since all of them were like you based on the 4 elements, and of course we know how Sejal sir got you to the fire segment that you talked about in the Mami session also. But I want to talk to you specifically about when you are making a film like that, which is got whose narratives are so theme driven, and when you're approaching the PD and the look and the feel of it, how do you keep in mind that it doesn't go overboard? Like the water segment, we can see water in practically all the frames, and it's very like it's not done like in your face kind of a way. It's just there. So that balance of not going beyond it, what's your approach towards creating that?
The idea was because so theme related, that it should not the idea was to make sure that it doesn't go, every story was approached the idea that it should not be in your face. It should be a subtle layer, but yet complementing and accentuating the story as much as possible. So it was written into the script, and those elements were pre-decided way before shoot. We decided that, like for example, for the Jalam story, the water story, like we knew the opening sequence, Dhansika's dance sequence, will be in water. We knew there's a pool sequence. Those are the things that were pre-decided. We knew that Dulquer is chatting with his friends and talking about her. They will be sitting by the swimming pool. So, and we knew that the climax is gonna happen on a beach. So, wedding will be on a resort. So, like I said, those elements were decided, but then as we approach them, we also have to make sure that we don't, like you said, very clearly said, we don't go overboard with it and we don't like push it in your face. So that's again, aesthetically you have to be very careful that as much as you're trying to do this, it should not be slapped across your face all the time. So for each story, that was the attempt. In fact, the wind story of the wind, it was kept in a very, very subtle way. Though water was an element that we could explore, with wind there is a very easy thing to do that we could have done throughout the sound, but we decided not to do it. We decided to hold back and use it only sparingly and make sure we use it correctly. So it's a choice you make.
So, like in the water segment, like maybe I'm reading too much into it, but the ice pack, the use of that, I was like, okay, everything is an element of water. Everything is a kind of the going there. So, where did that narrative come from? Like Solo, where did that come from? Like I'm asking this for every film, but like Solo, and the idea of casting the same actor for playing all these characters. What was why do that?
Uh, I remember I was in Chennai to meet um an actor. Let me not say. I was in Chennai to meet an actor who had just said no to me for one film, and this was after some 4 5 meetings. He had said no to me for one. I was very because I was really keen to make one film, and that did not happen. And I that was the last nail of the coffin. And on my way back from the meeting, uh, I remember I just messaged Dulquer because I remembered that Dulquer is going to be in Chennai and we were supposed to meet long time back. So I just messaged him and he happened to be free that day. And I went to meet him and we had this 6 hour meeting. Uh, our, our, our narration meetings are usually a 6 hour meeting where we chatted about so many stories, so many films. And that's where I bounced off these three ideas, for Solo. We didn't have the fourth one at that time. And I told him that it would be. I mean, the idea was to, on a lark. I pitched him that would you be interested in playing a like if it's an anthology film and you play this the lead in all three. And he said that might be overkill. I said it will be, but then at the same time it might be an interesting thing because you get to play 4 different characters. At that time I was saying 3, but I said we'll end up with 4. So it was a gamble of a pitch to Dulquer, and I'm glad because he liked the story idea. He liked the ideas a lot, and I'm glad he took on that. And I'm glad he was responsive to it. He was quite positive to it, and that helped me. That helped me reinforce the idea of Solo. I mean, I still didn't have the fourth idea, but with the 3 stories which he responded positively to, that got me going. And then I started the process. But one thing he said was, let's try and do a bilingual. He was keen to try and do a bilingual thing at that time. And I was not sure about it because I was not sure some of the stories will work in Tamil or not. Then I got a Tamil writer and then I started developing it further. So that's how Solo started. Solo started on, I remember on that particular day when this other actor said no, and I just happened to meet Dulquer, and it was so reassuring because he connected with this, and I had never pitched these ideas to anyone. It was these ideas that I just parked in my. In fact, weirdly, one of the ideas was part of the series Flip that I did. So the Bluetooth story idea was part of Flip, which never got made in Flip. So I pitched the idea to Dulquer, and he absolutely loved those. That's how it happened.
So, like with this, like that's feature film filmography is done now. So let's come to like the last segment of my this thing. You once said that you would love to assist Diwakar Banerjee. You would agree to assist Diwakar Banerjee.
I'm not saying it for effect. I would still love to do it, and given the time, given if he takes me on, I would love to go work with him.
Yeah, and I've been trying to get him get an interview with him for the past 3 months. So yeah, yeah. So talking about that, your love for money, sir, and
remember I told you that there are filmmakers that you wait for. Like he's one filmmaker I wait to watch his film. I wait कि अब ये क्या बना रहा है, मेरे को देखना है.
Talking about money, sir, and the influence that he has had on you with Ravan and with Guru, what do you consider like the one thing that, because you have an insight into how he works, how he functions, when you were discovering this, like right before Shaitan you worked on Ravan, what was that one learning that you took on as an aspiring filmmaker before making your first film, and what is one thing that you would tell to all the like me and everyone who's trying to make their first film? Just yeah,
it's not that one thing, yeah, because see, going on his set, working on his set is a masterclass. It's literally it's like going to college because of filmmaking, because purely because of the kind of talent that he manages to get together for a film. And so you are not just learning from him, you're learning from everything. You're learning from the surrounding that you are part of. And which is why I still go whenever I get a break, whenever I get some time, I keep going back to assisting him, because for me it's a great way to just learn not just from him. Again, from him, the learning is immense, of course, because you have read a script and you have seen how he's transforming that script into the way he stages, way he cuts it, way he executes it. So you're getting first-hand access to that. That itself is a great learning. But then you see how he works with the team, how he works with the PD, how he works with the costume person, how he works with the action person, how he works with the choreographer. So each equation, you're watching it in close proximity, and for me, I was just soaking it in. Guru and everything. I was the AD. I remember we started off with some 8 ADs, and after 10 days, it was just 3 of us. So and the 3 of us ran till the end of the film. It was just 3. In fact, by the end of it, it was just 2. So we were running the whole show, and so we were given so many responsibilities, and we had first-hand access to everything. So it was a great way to learn for me. Whatever I've learned being on a set. So, and even now, and that's what, whenever I have a break, I go back, work with him only because I get to learn. I get to just watch and learn how he's able to extract work out of actors, how he's able to extract work out of his technicians, and I don't think any other what do you call it? I mean, I'm sure the filmmaking education that you can get from college, all that would be great to clear your fundamentals, but hands-on experience of actually getting access to this kind of information is priceless.
Yeah, everyone says that, like Shahid Ali sir says that all the time. Tishu sir says that. You're saying that's
See,
great.
so when I go to work, I get to see how Shad works. You understand? So I'm getting to see how so I've not worked with Shad on his set, but I've worked with Shad when Shad is working on Manisa's set. So I'm getting access to that as well. I'm getting so even all that is also learning, right? You're getting to understand people, how they are also looking at stuff and how they're adding value.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Choose between two, like from one Manisa fan to another. Katruvelli Day or Okay Kanmani?
Katruvelli Day.
Okay.
Because I worked on it.
Okay, great. So yeah, last question before opening up for question. That's a really trivial question. You said somewhere that which was that scene that Shah Rukh Khan agreed to do Dil Se for. What was that scene? Please, we want to know.
I don't think I should reveal that. That's something personal he told me. But it's there. It's there on record. I remember reading it also somewhere. It was there in one of the old film fairs. Something I read it. I remember. It is I'll tell. It's a scene where he's being chased, which is not there in the film. It's there. It's there for a fraction of a second only. Where in the night he's escaped from the cops after that action scene, and the whole night he runs on the streets of Delhi, and it breaks into dawn. So that scene of that running on the streets of Delhi from night to dawn, which is there in the film for like a fractional thing, but I guess in the script when he read it, it just got to him, and he said that I need to do this film. So that, and he told me that was the scene.
Okay, so tell me a little about your next thing that you're doing.
Oh, I can't talk much about what I'm doing right now. Like I said, it's just I'm directing this 4 episodes for a Netflix show. That's all I can say with Madhuri Dixit.
Okay, I'll find out. Okay, for first-time filmmaker, how to know which story to do and how to get producers. This is something that Aksh Kalvan has asked. And what should be your style, your voice? Is what he's asked.
How to get producers? Please tell me how to get producers, because I'm also constantly on the lookout for producers. So I don't, for first-time filmmaker, nowadays, I guess you have to just, it's not enough that you have a good script, but you have to have some body of work to show, so that producers can also show faith in your script. So you need to show them something. It can be a small show reel, it can be a short film, it can be anything that you've done as a filmmaker that you can. And nowadays, the resources are available for you to do something like that. So I mean, available, they were always available, but they're available to you at a much lesser cost. So you can actually invest in creating a good show reel for yourself, and use the show reel, use that to pitch for features. That's what I did. I had a bunch of short films, and I used to carry those DVDs with a rubber band and along with the script of Shaitan, and that's how I used to go meet producers. And how to get producers, even I have no clue, because I'm also constantly looking for producers to fund my films. And style, I can't help you with that. Yeah, style is something you have to find. Style and voice, as a filmmaker, you need to find it in your story. You need to find it in the way you choose to tell your story.
Um, Amay from Facebook has asked me that how much does the audience influence a filmmaker's voice or a writer's, like a director's or a writer's voice? How much does the audience influence that?
Depends on filmmaker to filmmaker. Depends on, because if you're a filmmaker who, and we should listen to the audience in terms of what they have liked, what they've rejected, what they're liking right now, what they're consuming more, then it automatically starts influencing the way you start thinking. And not that you write for them, you write for what is right for the story, but somewhere at the back of your head you do keep a track of the audience pulse.
Yeah. Like how much has it influenced your voice over a period of time?
I don't even know how to put it down in like a tangible way. Uh, like I said, it's there at the back of my head, but I don't let it influence the way I write or what I write. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have written stuff like Solo. I wouldn't have done stuff like even Tesh, for instance. It's not your regular mainstream commercial fare. So, but at the same time, it's being presented and packaged as to make it as accessible as possible, which was the same thing with Shaitan. Shaitan is actually quite a dark, grim subject, but then I packaged and presented it to make sure that it reaches a wider audience. So I guess somewhere some of the things come into play. Some of the things do influence what you do, not necessarily in the writing, but maybe in the execution, maybe in the way you present it.
Yeah. Anita from Facebook has asked that I really like the different type of music of Solo. Could you tell us how did you land upon them? I mean, research including the sound design also. Like, what was that approach like? Music and
it's part of my writing process. As I'm writing, I start collecting, I start collating music, I start putting down sound cues of what I would like to be embedded into the story. So, sound is something I almost. I mean, sound is equally integral to me as the actor in the film. I mean, I really push, or rather, I really work a lot on the sound of the film. So, which includes the music as well, which includes the songs as well. So, it's part of my process, part of my writing process.
How do like someone is asking how do you suggest an aspiring filmmaker should create their story? And also they want you to talk a little bit about guerrilla filmmaking.
Talk a little bit about what?
Guerrilla filmmaking.
Guerrilla film.
Guerrilla filmmaking.
I can't really talk about guerrilla films too much.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not actually though. If people have seen the Getaway logo film, which comes in the Getaway, Getaway is the name of my company. Getaway logo film is this kid running,
and someone there's just like getting into the
chal. That was a guerrilla shot. That was done without permission, with cops chasing us, and I did that shot and parked it. And so that is my experience with guerrilla filmmaking. But how do you create? Well, there are so many avenues available now. Yeah, you can do micro shots, you can do short films, you can do a trailer of the film that you want to pitch. There's so many ways you can create a story. So I think research more and find out what others are doing. But see, I've just give you 4 ideas right now. So you can do a really 1 minute shot which showcases your ability to tell a story within a minute, or you can do like a narrative of anything between 5 minutes to a half an hour short film. You can create a teaser or a trailer for the film that you want to make, so that people understand the kind of mood and treatment you have in mind. So there are multiple ways that you can create a show.
So I have a question from Jelbin Sebastian. He says, "What do you do to create the team dynamics while working, like during the prep and everything, when you are getting the team together? What do you do to kind of create that space?"
Try and involve your HODs. Try and involve them as much as possible in the process, and try and involve them early on, so that they become they become as important to the script. I mean, for them, then they also start connecting to what you're trying to say, and they also are part of the evolving process. So try and involve your HODs from a very from the beginning.
Sagar has asked that any book recommendation on filmmaking, or a film that everyone should watch, which is not as discussed, as talked about.
Books, though I have been getting a lot. I mean, I've never really sat down and read books on filmmaking, but I do come across a couple of things time and again. I don't remember titles, but I do come across. But nowadays, more than books, I'm personally watching a lot of YouTube videos. There are some very interesting editors, some interesting cinematographers who started channels, YouTube channels, and they've decoded films, decoded processes, decoded systems. So I find that quite fascinating. In fact, I love to watch those. Even in fact, Shrikar Prasad sir, even Shrikar sir started a channel where he talked about his process of editing and all that. So I find all that very, very informative and very helpful. Let me plug my film. Let me plug. आया तो कुछ तो दे के जाऊंगा. It's like Crime Master Gogo. आया तो कुछ तो लेके जाऊंगा, तो आया तो कुछ दे के जाऊंगा. So I have made a Tamil short film which is part of an anthology for Netflix, and it's gonna come out hopefully in February. I've just finished it. I'm doing the post for it, and it's got a crazy cast in it. I was able to work with a phenomenal cast of Revati ma'am, Prakash Raj, and Vijay Sethupathi, and so and that's what's even more special is that particular short film is the first time that I've directed a short film, which the story has been written by Mani sir himself. So it's Mani Ratnam's story.
You have directed Mani sir's script.
I have directed exactly. So for me, it's like I can't even believe that I actually got an opportunity to do that. So it's a story written by Mani sir, with a screenplay written by me and Arpita Chatterjee. And get this, it's got dialogues written by Vijay Sethupathi. So it's got like some crazy dynamics happening. Plus, like I said, all three have acted in the film. It's part of an anthology. It's Navarasa. It's 9 directors making 9 short films. So I'm in some great company, some phenomenal other directors who are part of it. But I'm only plugging my film. Mera pakka dekhna. So February, I think hopefully it will come out in February on Netflix. It's called Navarasa, and it's being presented by Mani sir and Jayendra. And the film is being made. This whole project is being put together. I'm not supposed to talk about it, but anyway, I'm just putting it out there. It's for the COVID affected film fraternity in the South. So all the profits from this particular project are going towards all that. So it's for such a noble cause that we all come together. So I'm very happy that I was called for something like this. So, but for me, it was just super exciting to work on a story by Mani sir and with a cast like this. It was a dream cast to work with.
That's great. We're so excited. We're so psyched about it. I will definitely watch it in February or whenever it comes out. Navarasa on Netflix, guys. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad I got to plug it. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir.